on this episode of the Paranormal Rundown.
I can't think of anything in the world in terms of evil, in terms of human potential, in terms of human life, without going back to the time when I was working in these hospitals in Houston. Everything takes me back to that time because I was working in places where you were seeing the raw, unfiltered humanity. There's no filter between yourself and what you were seeing. And I worked at MD Anderson until I burned out, which was about 14 months. That was all I could take. When you're working in a place where everybody you take care of dies, it just, your brain checks out. Your mind says, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I'm just too depressed. And
that's why Josh doesn't work on an ambulance anymore. He used to transport patients. Mm-hmm. And he said, I got tired of folks dying on me all the time.
Right. So he knows what I'm talking about. I mean, he's there. He worked as hard as he could. He did everything he could possibly do to save this patient. And a lot of times you just can't save them. There's nothing you can do. And the part that stuck in my mind the most wasn't the ER. I mean, I saw a lot of things in the ER. It wasn't OR. It was working on the pediatric cancer ward at MD Anderson. And you would see these kids who they're going to die. I mean, it's a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old little boy, little girl, sweet, kind, funny, just like any other kid. And, bone marrow transplant, bald, loss of body weight, all this kind of stuff. The children, for the most part, they would seem to come to an understanding that, okay, I'm going to die. I don't really like that idea, but I'm going to die, and I'm going to live my life the best I can before I do die. It was the parents who couldn't handle this. The parents would get so angry. Well, first off, both with us for not being able to cure the child, and with God for putting them through this. And I can't tell you how many conversations, and I'm going to use language that I don't normally use here, but I can't tell you how many conversations where I've heard something like, God's nothing but a motherfucker. How could he do this? I've heard this over and over and over again. And sometimes the parents were not particularly careful about when they said this, and the children heard it. And the children would turn into protectors and comforters at that point. Okay, and they would say things like, don't be so sad, Mom. Don't be so sad, Daddy. I'm still here and I'm going to be okay. And I understood the point of absolute emotional bereftedness. Is that a word, JJ?
I like it.
That they were,
sounds good to me.
that they were going through. But I never ever got over the quiet courage of these children. That's awesome. And I know this isn't directly hitting that point of evil, but these children were not angry at God. They were understanding that they were dealt a deck of cards that gave them a short life, but they were not angry with God. The parents often were. That was probably a totally useless thing to say.
No,
because I would say that many of those parents would consider that to be pure evil.
Oh, yes, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Right? That experience, pure evil. And it's almost like what you're saying is those children have been given a very specific grace from God to weather that experience, to be able to take it that way. And maybe it's because they're young and they're able to handle things that way, or maybe it is sort of a gift from God to be able to, not fall apart at the end of it. part of it is we adults have a lot of baggage too.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So-
Where am I headed right now?
Well, the one thing that we haven't really heard yet, and I would love to hear, is a man of the cloth response to the question of God and evil.
I'm disqualified.
As am I. So, not to put you on the spot, Father Mike, but
No. I mean, it's a great question, and it's a question that deserves to be answered.
But I mean, I can't imagine the number of times that you have had parishioners and others come up to you and ask you these horribly impossible questions.
Coming right off the cuff, JJ, because it is a question that will take you back if you're not prepared for it. But I think it boils down to, well, as a matter of fact, I was listening to one of the older episodes today, and the words Antichrist came up. To come to the point of God and evil, I would reckon it as part of being anti-God or anti-Christ. For instance, I mean, everything was good until Lucifer fell to pride, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was the greatest creation at that time. He was the light bearer, but he allowed pride to enter into his heart, and that just basically flies in the face of God and who he is, because God cares about all his creations. And but I would say anything evil per se is against the love of God. I mean, if you think about it, everything evil defies the love of God. If you stop and think about it, think about who God is, what he is, everything that he's about, the good, the light, the as Christ talks about, the salt, the preservation of all mankind, of all his creations, even to when he said, "Let there be light," everything was good. The scripture tells us that he is the Father of light. He is the giver of all good gifts unto man. And anything that defies that is the total opposite and can be considered evil. Now, that's just an answer right off the cuff, but we can dive deeper in that later on.
Well, I think the only
If
place,
any of that made any sense.
it makes perfect sense. I mean, the only place we haven't gone is, kind of the answer of God to Job, of, why, and the answer is, were you there when I, laid the foundation of the earth? Were you there when I built the universe? Were you there when all of these things? So, who knows what the plan of God is for us? Period. I somehow have this feeling inside. It's a very positive feeling, JJ. Since you're feeling down, that God has far more planned for us than we can even begin to understand. And
I agree with that.
And that the perhaps one of the purposes of going through this pain, experiencing evil, experiencing loss, experiencing those things that we do, is to prepare us for whatever it is that God has in store. And we don't understand very much at all about the universe, really. I just assume and I've come to this over many years, and it's not something that is a great intellectual leap or anything, that God has created a universe that we don't fully understand, and there's a reason for the things that happen, and that may be a reason we simply can't perceive right now.
Even the things we do understand, even the things we do understand about society, about science, about social interactions, we still can't see all of those things from a big picture view. Mm. And the suffering that one person has from an exposure to evil has a ripple effect throughout the entire organism that is mankind. It affects the people around them. It affects the things that they say and do, which can have broader effects with the people they work with, the people they see at a Starbucks, anything that they do is affected by their experiences. And, short of some AI running on massive quantum computers, you can't calculate all of the possible impacts of the good that can come out of some evil event that affects somebody in a bad way.
Hear all the exciting details on the Paranormal Rundown, available on all podcast platforms, YouTube and Rumble.